Hello, everybody. Today we start our second series of dialogue between startup leaders and thought leaders of innovation. Today we continue the discussion of the impact of COVID-19 on the global tech, how we disrupt industries, create new business models, and find new opportunities in crisis. And today I have our honorable speakers representing different segments and sectors. And among them, I introduce you Daniel Applestone, CEO of co-founder of Daughters of Rosie, Swaroop Hegde, co-founder and CEO of Block Virgil, Mary Kane Dawson, Group CEO of Takumi, Brian Lang, Corporate Development and Strategic Alliances of Last Line, Stan Mondlux, Managing Partner of RAM Catalyst, Marcus Yoder, Vice President and Regulated Markets Business Development of Gamblit, and my co-moderator today, Giampaolo Parigi. He's representing family office, single family office as a chairman, and also a venture capitalist. Please, Giampaolo, join the floor and introduce yourself in a couple of words.
Good day, everyone. My name is Giampaolo Parigi. I'm a serial entrepreneur, venture capitalist, investment banker, and chairman of a single family office. And I have a lot of interest in technology, emerging markets, and I'll leave the floor now to our honorable guests today. Thank you.
Yes, we have a number of questions to cover, and we'll give the floor to each of you. And the key questions we would like to address today in how do you feel the impact of the current pandemic on your businesses? Daniel Applestone, could you share your views? Thank you.
Absolutely. Danielle Applestone, CEO of Daughters of Rosie. So I serve really the manufacturing and transportation industries, and we're a marketplace for companies in those sectors to find high potential hourly workers that wouldn't normally otherwise be taking jobs in those industries. And what we see is actually there's an uptick in things like orders, anything that has to do with packaging or food or personal protective equipment supply chain, valves for ventilators, for example. And what we see is actually a hesitance because these companies are getting a lot of orders now, but they're worried that they're essentially bringing forward a lot of the business that they would be getting in Q4 because their supply chain is nervous. And so they're getting advanced orders. And one of the interesting things and how it impacts us is they're like, well, we would normally be hiring. If we got this many orders in a normal time, we would hire extra. But we're holding off or we're hiring temporary workers because we're not sure that this demand is real. And so, we're probably seeing in this industry a slowing of hiring, but potentially, a spike in the next couple of months, just due to the overwhelming crisis response and need for supplies.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And Mary Kane Dawson, could you please also share some of your experiences in this field?
Sure. Afternoon. My name is Mary Kane Dawson, and I'm Group CEO of Takumi. And Takumi is one of the world's largest global influencer marketing specialists. We have offices in Germany, the UK, and the US. And we've seen experienced a different outcome from COVID-19, dependent on where we are in the world, and also dependent on what the advertisers and agencies are, their situations are, so by sector. So broadly speaking, the main differentiator has been if you are a brand or a business that sells direct to consumer or has a direct to consumer need, i.e. a performance driven business model, then we have actually seen a significant growth in those businesses. Some of them actually are talking about uncapped budgets at this time. And that's primarily because platforms such as TikTok and Triller, etc., and Instagram, where they are you're able to download streaming apps, services and products that you can buy direct. It's a field day for them. And that's particularly true, I think, more so, the growth is more so in Europe and the US, and UK and the US. We've seen that more than we have seen in mainland Europe at the moment. And I think that's because mainland Europe has been very, very badly affected, as have other parts of the world. But just in terms of our footprint as an international business, that is where we have seen that. What we have seen also is a lot of brands, especially regional or national brands, putting a hold on any activity or trying to pause activity or postpone it to later in the year, because they're just unsure of what the impact of COVID-19 is going to be on their overall business. And that goes right across the board pretty much. But interestingly enough, several of the world's largest FMCG brands have actually continued to invest at similar or slightly reduced levels in influencer campaigns. So interestingly enough, we are experiencing different responses dependent on where the population is, the local populations are in relation to the pandemic. But we are also seeing differences dependent on the business model of the brands.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mary. Marcus, would you also like to join our discussion? Thank you.
Sure thing. Good morning, good afternoon. So I run sales and business development for a company called Gamblet Gaming. We're in the casino gaming industry, and we provide games that create a new revenue stream for the casinos and the communities that they serve. And that part about the community is what I want to focus on most here. So in the United States and Canada, 99.99% of all casinos are closed. In the United States alone, that's 635,000 employees, and the ancillary businesses that support them are another 2 million employees. So while you may have a certain opinion of gambling and casinos, they're an integral part of the United States and Canada and many other jurisdictions as well to produce tax revenue. So now you've got both unemployment and then a decrease in tax revenue. The casinos in Macau are starting to come back online, but at a very low level in terms of visitation. And we think that that will be a continuing trend in the United States for at least through the next 6 weeks or so. And then we have to consider what will happen when they reopen. The typical slot player is 65 to 70 years old. And those individuals either may be sick or may have a heightened sense of fear to come back to that location, because basically you're touching things and touching machines. So a lot of the casinos are actually pulling machines out of the casinos to create social distancing so that you're not sitting next to somebody and just heightening the sense of cleaning. They're already preparing to do that. But we've also seen a shift directly to online gaming in Europe. Obviously, that's a already accepted and well-practiced pastime. From the operators that we've spoken to in Europe, they're seeing a 50% increase in their gross gaming revenue, or basically the wagering taking place. Interestingly enough, sportsbook used to be huge, and now it's pretty much the only thing you can gamble on is esports, which is good for that small industry. But I think you're going to see a change that will affect in the new normal when gambling opens back up. Even for our own company, we have been considering going online, but this certainly has rapidly accelerated our entry into the online space.
Perfect. Thank you, Marcus. So while most of the people are stuck at home, they move to edtech, digital entertainment and gaming. Swaroop, what do you see in your segments? Would you share?
Hi, I'm Swaroop. I'm co-founder and CEO of Blockangel, blockchain, which is digital lines of code. So sort of continuing into, so my previous venture was in esports. I started this about 6-7 years ago. So I can see a trend there where it's ramping up. But my focus has mostly been on blockchain for the past couple of years. And the biggest impact on our company particularly has been fundraising. So I started the fundraising about, I would say, a week before the outbreak. And after that, it was just downhill from there. So even the ones we were pretty much in the due diligence stage has sort of, they've either ghosted or they've sort of reached out saying they've had to sort of pause on fundraising. And that has affected our company directly. And I think that's, we are also part of 500 Startups Network. So
Okay, thank you. And Brian?
Yeah, so my name is Brian Lang. I have corporate development and business development for Last Line. We're a network security company protecting our users from advanced threats. And for us, it's sort of what we're seeing. And I've been in security for 25 years now, partially in the actually breaking into computers for companies, and then on the back half, actually designing software to help stop it. And what we're seeing is that, we've got a situation where many people are working from home, and all the threats that all of the security layers that have been put in place in the corporate network aren't there for when people are working from home. So a lot of our customers, a lot of our OEM customers, et cetera, are working with their customers to scramble around and see how they can actually deploy more of the security layers they have when the users are on the corporate network onto their home connections. And that's, creating opportunities a lot for anybody who's running, VPNs, web gateways like Zscaler or endpoint vendors, and others that are just purely in the network, because it's all layered together, are really scrambling to look at different ways they can get this deployed, because even to get it into the data center, nobody's at the data center. So if nobody's at the corporate data center, you can't actually install anything. And that is causing people problems, and we're seeing attacks that are getting through because of that.
Thank you so much, Brian. And we also, could you also share your views on the current effect on your business? Stan from Ramp Capture.
I think I might be the next one here up on the list here. I'm Stan Molnix. I'm the managing partner at Ramp Equity and an operating partner at Ramp Catalyst. Ramp Catalyst is an investment advisory fund focused on accelerating companies and innovations that might be strategic to large corporations and spinning out smaller performing divisions that are no longer core to that company. At Ramp Equity, for like the last 20 years, we've been focused on the sell side, supporting early stage tech companies as they go through, the high growth and exit. And we just launched Ramp Catalyst because we saw an opportunity on the buy side. Ramp Catalyst will be focused on spin outs and roll ups. So in a way, we see this as a rather opportune time for us. There's a lot work to be done, and there's definitely limited capital. But we're following a lot of skunk work type projects in larger corporations. And we believe that this summer we'll see some of these corporations divesting of those non-core assets. Now, they might be just terminating the R&D outright, but they might also be spinning some of these projects out. And we see these spin outs as a great opportunity for family funds or for high net worth angel investors to invest alongside large corporations and startups that have a lower than usual risk profile. So for us, we think this might be a really unique opportunity to really take a look at value in the marketplace. But when I look at this from the eyes of a serial entrepreneur, somebody who's started a lot of startups in the past, part of me says, this is a great time for product managers because, they're using Slack and Jira. They can do stand-ups virtually. They've got a lot of the tools, and you go into any typical startup office here in Seattle, and everybody's heads down with their headsets, looking at their monitors. Anyhow, working virtually for that team it's really not very difficult. I mean, one of the companies I worked with, we had 12 people that never worked in the same office at the same time until they were bought by Microsoft and kind of forced into the same office for the first time. So we work with a lot of people that have the skills and really a rhythm of business that lets them work independently. But we know that running a startup it's hard in the best of times. And if you're in that position in that cycle of your business, you're maybe early A or pre-A, just out of your seed round, and you need to go to the well, you need to go back to your investors and ask for support to get through this period, it's going to be tough. That there's a lot of capital that's going to be sitting on the sidelines for at least a few months, and a few months is time that a lot of startups just don't have. So you're going to see it, and you're going to see a lot of people on the sides that were kind of on the edge. They're going to fall off. And I've seen it, people I know that just knew they weren't going to make this next 8-week gap, and they're just pulling the trigger on it now. And I think that anything that touches hospitality is going to be impacted. Hospitality and travel, and a lot of the guys I know, they had marketing technology companies that were looking at that were getting a lot of the revenue from those industries, and so they were really, really hurt with their cash flow because they got a pull in their advertising. So we know there's a lot that's going on out there, but I think for the early stage entrepreneur, it's going to be a challenging few months. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you very much, Dan. And Marcus, you had a comment also.
Yeah, to your comment, as well as to Swaroop's comment, I advise 3 technology companies, and the current situation actually, I think, is going to end up being a positive because they were in decision paralysis and they needed to sell. And while we're probably going to come in 20% lower than what they were negotiating, this has actually forced a good decision for them to sell the assets that they've created and move on. It's basically an acqui-hire so that they can continue on. So some of it, that's probably more on the minority, but there are some situations where it's actually causing a good decision to be made.
And Gianpaolo, do you have any questions to our panelists as well?
Yes, I have. Well, I've heard some very interesting comments, and specifically what Marcus and Brian mentioned. And I have a question for all the panelists, and I would like to hear from each one of them, in retrospective, what would they have rather done or not done had they known 1 year ago that the COVID-19 was about to come?
This is Brian. I can chime in with that. I think for speaking for myself and some of our OEMs, I would have worked with looking at where the attack surface is and looking at ways that we can adjust various security products to work with that changing environment a little bit. We've already been doing that with a lot of the vendors moving towards more cloud deliver services. But I would have probably moved around some of our development priorities as well as some of our partner development priorities to focus more on, tying into technologies like SD-WAN and VPNs to route the the home users' traffic through a dynamic security cloud. Everybody's working on similar things. In fact, Palo Alto just bought a very large SD-WAN company last week. And I think that would be something I would have increased the priority across, last line as well as our OEM partners in preparation.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else?
Yeah, for us, we would have gone directly online. Luckily, or unfortunately, we have a big enough team, but a small enough team that we can pivot. And so we'll be able to get these games out in short order.
For me personally, I think I actually took over at Takumi as group CEO on the 7th of February. So I probably would have joined a lot earlier if I had known, I'd foreseen what was going to happen in quite the way that it has turned out. And the reason for that was because I think we as a business didn't really, anticipate. We were too, as businesses are, they're very much wrapped up in what's going on in front of them or in the next, the next few weeks, particularly. And I think that COVID-19, it seemed very far away from all of us. And it came in the night. It was like one day things were normal, and then the next they weren't anymore. And then new normal is now what we are responding to. And inevitably that has meant, as I said earlier, I'm witnessing really massive contrasts in business models that work in this crisis, that are thriving, not working, they're thriving in this crisis, and business models which are completely and utterly, are absolutely like status has come into play, and making decisions is becoming, for some very large corporations, it's very evident that it's very difficult for them to move nimbly and with agility, whereas actual startup businesses in the sectors I mentioned earlier are able to switch it on, and ramp it up because they're seeing directly the benefits of it. So it is the contrast of, if you like, the old model and the new model could not be more vivid than it is right now.
Thank you, Mary. Next, Annie.
Actually, I can have a comment on this one. So since we are serving people who are typically moving from the service industry into manufacturing and transportation sectors, those are all the people that, in the United States, the newly unemployed 10 million people. And we also have an aspect of our business, which is retraining these people to go from the service industry type of skills, get some training, and then move into these new industries. And that was a thing that we had planned for small numbers. And kind of a year from now, we would have a system for that. And right now, what we're seeing is we're completely flooded. There's so much on the supply side that if we had the systems in place to retrain them quickly already, we would be able to deploy that to millions of people, in which case now we're having to divert resources to that. And thankfully, we were able to close a funding round to do so. But that's definitely something I wish I could have known about and invested in last year.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you so much. And what about that social impact effect, Marcos?
So I work with a nonprofit called Brighter Children. We sponsor students in schools in developing countries or areas of countries, Colombia, Honduras, Kenya, and a Educate Girls program in India. We rely on fundraising. And what we've seen is that they're for our, I would say, middle of the road donor, we see a significant drop off. The higher end donors pretty much are staying the same, but where we are seeing very inspirational and hopeful developments is that many of the foundations are loosening their restrictions on what they will actually provide grants to. So they may have a direction or a strategy or an approach that they only will fund operations or nonprofits that are functional in the United States. Now they're opening them up a bit more, there are many organizations like Black Fox Philanthropy that are helping to make those connections to those nonprofits from the foundations that have the grants to connect them. So I'm seeing the community of, I call them business leaders within nonprofit, working together to basically get the money out has been so far, very motivating. The Skoll Foundation also does great work with that right now.
Thank you, Marcus. Stan, do you have any comment on that as well?
Was a comment on the social aspect, or the comment on being prepared for this if we were looking the rearview mirror?
That would be great if you have both.
Well, we're putting together a nonprofit right now with Ramp Catalyst, working with some of our higher net worth members, that is really focused on driving more empowerment to people under 25. What we're doing is matching grants and challenge grants to projects that are being supported by those under the age of 25, in projects that show a demonstrated impact on your carbon footprint. And this is a way of kind of acknowledging that this generation is getting screwed and don't have the tools to actually address the problem. So we're looking at a way to kind of endow them with more tools to do this. And interesting enough, we look at kind of blockchain and smart contracts as a really interesting mechanism to provide transparency and accountability in this process. So if anybody knows a blockchain group that's experienced in the supply chain to nonprofits, be interested in talking with them. We're trying to launch that. But in a lot of ways, that for the investors we're working with, they're very attuned to this need and to the challenges within their community. If I had to look back at this situation, if I saw this coming, and had perfect foresight, obviously it would be to marshal the funds to get them in place. Now is there's a very unique window of opportunity here to make investments and to pull businesses together, but the resource, the lifeblood of capital that's needed to put that together is scarce right now. And so it takes a strong and a very well disciplined investor to partner with us in that process. And if we'd known, it was coming, we can lay that groundwork and have those conversations. Right now it feels like we're selling into a situation, but the truth is, when we look back at 2008, when the last really strong stress on the economy came, we saw great businesses start. We saw Airbnb started, Groupon started out of that, and if we're going to see some really interesting innovations come out of this. The lucky few of us might be able to join in and invest in those. But we will see it. It's just the way that startups are the most nimble, most innovative part of the economy, and they're going to lead the larger corporations on this. So it's an exciting time, and I wish I just could prepare the investors for that if I had the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Stan. And Swaroop, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think so. I can pretty much echo what everyone's been talking. So, having been an entrepreneur, mostly doing startups all my life, I've never really had a gig at a corporate job. So this is something I've always prepared for. As a matter of fact, me and my founder have a sort of a secret note in our internal document which says, prepare even for like a zombie apocalypse. What are you going to do then, right? What else can you actually pivot and go and fix that problem? So one thing that we're starting to see is, like, for us, at least as a company, was not just the technology wise, but it was actually reaching people. So something we've been doing in person with events, which used to cost us a lot more. Now when we're doing the same things remotely, there are more people showing up, right? So which actually, in a way, is sort of benefiting what we are trying to do with our business, irrespective of, I think, the industry that we are in. Also, as as a much leaner team, we can definitely take advantage of a situation where it's pretty much a level field for most people at the moment. The only thing I would say is that you have to address a need right now rather than a want. I think that's pretty much how I would like to say for anyone wanting to build a new business or pivot.
Perfect, thank you. And Brian?
Yeah, I think for us, we're we sort of look at the funding from two different ways. We see that there's a lot of opportunity for new security technologies, different ways to do security, but also for those selling security, there's a huge amount of opportunity because of the change. We're talking to customers right now, and while everybody's working from home, we're seeing a lot of signs that those people are going to remain working from home, which means, this isn't going to simply go back to normal once the virus has died out a little bit. It's going to have a fundamental shift on the way certain things do business. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity you see that we're using Zoom. They're doing very well. Zscaler and a few others are doing very well because their business model was targeting this sort of change. And now it's made a leap and bounds. I think over the next 6 to 18 months, we're going to see more investment, et cetera, in that sort of supporting the work from home efforts. And I think that this, in 5 years, we're going to look back as this was the first year that the great pandemic started. And that's going to also change fundamentally some supply chain business and other aspects as people put plans in place for the next time this happens.
Thank you, Brian. And Danielle?
The thing that I was just thinking about is around, how can our business be more broadly applicable? Because, for example, if you're serving the manufacturing and transportation industries, that's great, but maybe there's only, 1 million jobs there that you could fill with people who are newly unemployed. And thinking about like what role could we play in outplacement? So when you are let go of a company and you're moving into a new company, like what other sectors could we serve in the same way that we serve manufacturing and transportation? Because the key here is really like retraining and mobility for the hourly workforce. And one of the things that I was looking at yesterday was the graph of all of the people who were basically their jobs were going to be 100% automated in the next decade. And that was retail and food service and kind of low-level administration. And what I think that this pandemic has done is actually just accelerated the removal of those people from their jobs by about a decade. Because roughly like in the top 10 industries where you're going to see 100% automation, all those people are the ones who just filed for unemployment, at least in the United States. And so one of the things that I'm also thinking about is like, is this pandemic an instigator for automation in these industries like manufacturing and transportation? And then what does that mean for all of the 10 million people who have been displaced? What do we as a society do with those people? And how does Daughters of Rosie play a role in that transition for all of those people?
Thank you very much, Danielle. And how do you think that community of startuppers and entrepreneurs, investors could help each other in this current situation? What could be the new forms of collaboration, if any? And do you see this type of collaborations in your current environment? Marcus?
I see the majority of cooperation in the startup nonprofit, if you will. I think everybody is more motivated. They're already focused on a general good, and so they're more open to communicate and share tips with other people who are focused on a general good. The other flip side, in looking at the available capital that is not parked on the side, as Stan had mentioned. it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. There actually might be less cooperation. I think the networks that are already built, the entrepreneurs coming out of a certain school, coming out of, people who have left Zynga and started all their business, that natural network will support each other, as well as the VCs and the private equity firms who are obviously have vested interest in supporting the companies that they're already working with. I think you'll see probably a lot more engagement from VCs and PEs into the actual management of the company.
Thank you. And Stan?
We have one of our projects we have is basically a roll-up that's looking at prescriptive and predictive analytics in the space that really focuses on loyalty programs for Fortune 100 programs. And there are kind of a group of businesses we saw that worked really well together, but they were all kind of small and operating independently. All of them EBITDA positive or kind of in that kind of stable range, but not big enough to kind of punch their ticket out. And so they were in kind of this steady state of they've been around for 4 or 5 years now, and they're showing that they're kind of up and down on the profit, but they're carrying their own. We've signed, I think, 3 term sheets within the last 2 weeks to pull these companies together, because operating as a single entity, they provide better stability to each other because there's some synergies they can bring together. And obviously, as an exit, it's better. It's a lot easier to sell a company for 40 million than it is for 4. It's just simply easier because you got a different audience and you attract a different group of buyers. So to me, that's the way I see some of the cooperation coming. If you can find good co-op marketing opportunities, ways to address the same account in your sales process. A lot of business development work that we've done in the past is really highlighted that. And today, you need to be scrappy, and startups need to look now more than ever for opportunities to really leverage their resources. And sometimes the resources are other companies servicing the same market.
Thank you, Stan. Gianpaolo, do you have any questions?
I'm hearing a lot of very interesting comments again. I think it's a very good panel, and some of the ideas that definitely will survive COVID-19 will become template for future business for many, many years to come, for decades on end. Definitely one is cooperation, which is not only applicable to the nonprofit. There are people that have been applying that in, through synergies and alliances, old schools, networks, and, ex-employees or large corporations, categories of professionals. I think that there will be a revitalization through a new meaning to the word the cooperation. It will be more profound, really deeper, and it will be more engaging. So I think that we will have, well, maybe not a paradigm shift, but we will have to consolidate a number of industries, and definitely, particularly in the lower end of those industries, there will be enough room for cooperation. And possibly, Danielle, what you were mentioning about repositioning millions of individuals, that this crisis, what this crisis basically did is just, let's say, lifting that very thin veil that was mystifying a number of jobs, like temporary jobs, but in reality, they were really people nearly unemployed in disguise. And now we gotta call a spade in the United States, but also in Europe, and you can imagine in the rest of the world, obviously, because if we have millions of people that we knew were going to be displaced, because this was hanging around for quite some time. We know the categories that were shredding off more jobs over the next 10 years. You've seen all sorts of rankings in the press and the media. Now we're beginning to really waking up and smelling the coffee. And I think we need to find quickly, also from a political and social level, not only an economical level, real answers to this, because otherwise we got, the 4 nightsmen of the apocalypse coming. And, sure enough, another cause of force majeure like this, another event like this that could come, because the fact that we're having COVID-19, it doesn't mean that we cannot have an earthquake or a volcano eruption or a tsunami or a meteorite rain. So, what I'm saying, we need to be really prepared. Bill Gates and others have been telling us for years, but, most of their words went on, fell on, deaf ears. Yes, beside paying the usual lip service to the notion that we should do something. Now I think it's really the moment. Otherwise, we'll have to brace for much worse conditions socially, riots, social unrest, and upheaval, and it's going to be dramatic. So I think a cooperation in this respect will definitely take on a whole new meaning. It will be really 100% meant, not just as a formal buzzword, to utilize to just be fancy. I think it's going to be really content. Thank you.
Thank you, Gianpaolo. And Swaroop, do you feel any of this changing in paradigms? Do you feel any collaboration in your field?
Yeah, I think so. Something that I've been trying to study for the past 5 years was about a lot of remote work, right? Companies have sort of had mixed cultural setting. So it's apart from having set of rules about whether you can work from home to actually allowing people to actually just work remotely full time, right? And I think this has sort of completely changed that over, right? And I think as we've been talking about this new normal, the new normal might just be work from home, right? So one of the things that I was thinking about, like what happens when things do get better? Like at the moment, India is on complete lockdown. I barely escaped before the borders opened and was put on government quarantine, but we don't know if the situation will improve. So what companies might actually start to now think is remote first policy, and not just policy, actually setting a culture, which is much different from giving it as a set of rules, right? And I think that's what I'm very curious about. How does that change in beyond small startups like mine?
Thank you, Swaroop. And Brian, what do you think is vital for startups and the community of startups to survive any new series of crises? As Gianpaolo mentioned, there could be anything to come, right?
Yeah, I think you have to have a strong foundation. I think this is true regardless, but you have to have a strong foundation. My favorite is the Dave DeWalt talking about you have to put as much emphasis in being agile around your go-to-market as you do your product. And I think a lot of companies, they focus purely on the product. So when something like this happens, the product doesn't necessarily fit, or it's harder to get your product to market. Whereas if you have a diverse go-to-market strategy, that will help weather this storm. So for give you an example with Lastline, my team works with a lot of our OEM vendors. So we take a piece of our technology and we sell it through people like IBM and ForcePoint, et cetera. And then we also have our direct sales team. Well, this is impacting everybody's sales team, but because we're also selling through non-traditional, non-direct channels through the OEMs, we're much more in a better position to weather that storm. And I think that should be the key for any startup, is looking at the impacts that types of things like this can have on the selling, the value of your technology, and being able to adjust your delivery or even tweak the product slightly so that you can deliver and not have to shut the doors simply because of a catastrophe like this.
Thank you very much, Brian. And Mary?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment regarding the experiences that we are having in the marketing industry around the social media and influencer space, because it is now becoming the new normal. I'm sure any of you who have young adults or children in your lives, and even yourselves, are looking for escapism, right? At this time, because everywhere you go, there is so much negativity in the news and so on and so forth. So the exponential growth is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it's incredible. In fact, I think TikTok in the last 2 weeks has grown by 27%. That is phenomenal. And we're talking now billions of people all over the world engaging for long periods of time in content which is user generated. And the industry itself is relatively crowded. And there are lots of, to the point that Marcus was making earlier about, gentleman from Ramp was making earlier about how, there's lots of relatively small to medium-sized businesses that have been kind of like ticking along for a while, but there isn't that kind of scale that can really deliver, a global solution or, across all of the different elements. And I've been really surprised and, to be honest with you, completely delighted that my competitors, or people that I would normally consider to be my direct competitors, we are all collaborating. Well, I say all, certainly I'm collaborating with 4 or 5 of them right now that 4 weeks ago, we probably would have just said hi to each other and that would have been it. And I think that's really, really positive. But I think one of the things that is also difficult in a space where, skills and talent and education are very highly valued, and the expectation of your employees is about stability and everything being, the same, and that you can guarantee that there's a perception that there's a guarantee about the future. And that is really difficult in these circumstances because there's not been any kind of like warning for these younger people about what's happening, and I think there is a real disconnect between generations. I think I'm not talking about people who lived through the war, although obviously we still have those people who perhaps were born in the war and then lived through the 50s and 60s, and those are the most vulnerable in our society to this pandemic. But I'm talking about people who perhaps, like myself, who have had a career and have built and sold companies and done so and so forth, that we've lived a life. And I think it is this experience for a lot of people in their 20s and 30s and, and early 40s is very, very tough because it's just not known to them. And I think that is that is also something that I think will have implications in society as we move forward.
Thank you, Mary and Marcus.
As we were talking through this, one of the aspects I'm thinking of is, okay, what happens in the next year and the second year and the third year? Does this experience create a new seasonality that companies just need to be able to prepare for? And again, this is dealing with a bell curve of behaviors. Will some people remember that, hey, February is usually flu season, so something bad is going to come, even if it's just the regular flu. Will February travel start to have a seasonal drop off more so now than in other, the past 10 years or so? Will people remember?
Thank you so much, Marcus. And Gianpaolo, your comment?
Yeah, I wanted to add one item that I think we should consider. This is the first truly global event, way more than the so-called World War I and II have been. They have cost millions of casualties and affected many continents, but not all the world directly. This is affecting everyone. I think in the recent history of civilization, really, this is truly the first global event. And the problem is that we're still seeing just the tip of the iceberg, because the the contagion, unfortunately, is just hitting right now major densely populated areas in countries like India and continents such as Africa and Latin America. Well, the consequences and the devastation could be direr than what we have experienced so far in the north part of the world. So I think that when everything has been said and done, probably we'll have to reconsider a lot of activities that we are already putting into a new normal. And I'm not sure that we've reached yet the level in which we can talk about the new normal until we've seen how the world will have evolved. And hopefully the wave might pass without, say, not an enormous cost in terms of human lives and economic toll, but it might be again that if what we're seeing in Europe and in the United States and we've seen in China is anything to go by, well, we'll have to calculate, on a geometric scale the damages after the south of the world have suffered. And I think that it will open up a massive can of worm, because obviously there's a lot of factors that we have not yet taken into consideration because simply they have not come into the public domain. So what I'm saying is we should wait to reassess all our options, and I think we have to navigate by sight at the moment until the full scale, the full scope of the issue is better known. And because I think also that will create in turn, depending on how it goes, but a lot of opportunities for reconfigurations of the economic activities, that in the moment we are unable to fathom. But we should know that this is possibly, I'd say, a plan B or plan C that we have to keep in mind. And as I say, I hope that really the death toll will not be so dramatic, but there could be consequences that go beyond the scope of, let's say, a technology discussion. We might have to face much harsher problems with the social unrest, upheaval, and really famine and starving by millions of people that are left stranded without any possibilities of feeding themselves. So I think we are preparing probably for a hybridation of a profit and non-profit in a way that can open up, unleash really opportunities also for the technology companies. But as I say, I would be cautious to decide that now we're in a new normal because we haven't seen anything yet. Well, thank you all.
Thank you, Gianpaolo. And to finalize our today's discussion, which occurred to be really vivid and in-depth at the same time, I would ask you to maybe choose one word as a key word to go in this reshaping reality of ours. Swaroop?
I think I've said it, I'll be reiterating. So it's need, whether it's addressing the need or if you're working towards the need. That's the only way you will survive this.
Thank you. Brian?
I'll key off that and say agile. You have to be prepared to make changes to deal with each of the upcoming problems.
Thank you, Brian. Daniel?
My word is equity, because I think in this time it can be easy to just try to survive without thinking about the world that we want to build as a result of this crisis. So I always keep equity in mind.
Thank you. Stan?
Perseverance. I mean, it's going to be a hard time for every community on the planet. Nobody's escaping it, and there are a lot of people that aren't as fortunate as us are going to be looking at people like us in their community to help them out, and so we just need to radiate that perseverance and keep up the fight.
Thank you. Mary?
My word is two words. It's human creativity. I believe that humanity has the resources and within us to find solutions, and with ambition and with positivity, we can do that. We can overcome this. And it is down to the imaginations and the creative thinking of our society and our communities that will get us through this and bring us to a better place.
Thank you, Mary and Marcus.
One word and then an asterisk, discipline. So personal discipline as well as discipline with your teams. If a meeting starts at 8:30, it starts at 8:30. But then forgiveness as well, because you never know in what particular day somebody is really going through something that's extraordinary.
Thank you, Marcus and Gianpaolo.
I would use a Japanese word, kaizen, meaning improvement. I think that this crisis is showing us that there's a lot of room for improvement in many sectors of our daily life, social, political, and economical. And I think we should really, this is more than a bright side, more than a silver lining, so we should work on that.
Thank you, Gianpaolo, and thank you, everybody, so that you devoted your time to this panel discussion. You're all leaders and entrepreneurs and serial leaders and entrepreneurs as the drivers of change, not only for yourself, your families, friends, but teams, multiple teams. You scale around profit and non-profit organizations around the world. So today we had representatives from all over the world, as I mentioned, from Europe, US, and Asia. And we keep on gathering for this regular startup panel discussions to address the issue of impact in crisis on the various startup communities and on our regular businesses, traditional and non-traditional. So please send your themes and questions. We would accommodate all the speakers during this time when we're all stuck at home offices, and digital space is just providing us the room to share our views and exchange life hacks for those in need. I think today we rose quite a good topic of collaboration and the new forms of collaboration between all of us. Thank you so much, and see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.